to a breakthrough. In 1980, he created an equation of his own, one that combined all of the Julius sets into a single image. When Mandelbrot iterated his equation, he got his own set of numbers. Graphed on a computer, it was a kind of roadmap of all the Julius sets, and quickly became famous as the emblem of fractal geometry. The Mandelbrot set.
It's not easy to describe the Mandelbrot set visually. It looks like a man, it looks like a cat, it looks like a cactus, it looks like a cockroach. It's got little bits and pieces that remind us of almost anything that you can see out in the real world, particularly living things. So it has a character that reminds us of a lot of things, and yet it itself is unique and new.
The Mandelbrot set is real, an absolute thing, no question whatsoever. Any mathematician or any computer scientist or student in a school can study it and find the same, describe the same thing. It's a common experience. And so such things that can be magnified forever and have infinite precision do exist, but they're not touchable.
It's a geometrical shape, an icon, if you wish, which somehow embodies as an example a very important aspect of how the world works. Somebody recently actually called this set the thumbprint of God.
With this mysterious image, Mandelbrot was issuing a bold challenge to long-standing ideas about the limits of mathematics.
The blinders came off, and people could see forms that were always there, but formerly were invisible.
The Mandelbrot set was a great example of what you could do in fractal geometry, just as the archetypical example of classical geometry is the circle.
When you zoom in, you see them coming up again, so you see self-similarity. You see, by zooming in, you zoom, 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 you're zooming in, you're zooming in, and pop. Suddenly it seems like you're exactly where you were before, but you're not. It's just that way down there, it has the same kind of structure as way up here, and the sameness can be grokked.
Now we'll begin our serious exploration of the Mandelbrot set. A voyage which, in fact, could last forever and ever, much longer than the lifetime of the universe. I have here the full set, about 6 inches across. Now, if I blow this up, I'll increase the magnification now 13 times, and you see more and more detail is appearing. And the interesting thing is you see mini Mandelbrots, replicas, almost identical, yet perhaps subtly different, of the original set. And I can go on doing this. Here's a magnification of more than 3,000 times. So the original picture, about 6 inches across, is now half a mile across. And no matter how much we magnified it, a million times, a billion times, until the original set was bigger than the entire universe, we would still see new patterns, new images emerging, because the frontier, the M set, is infinitely complex. And when I say infinitely, I really mean that. Most people, when they say infinitely, they mean only rather big. But this is really infinity. What is so remarkable, in fact, astounding, about the Mandelbrot set is that although it's infinitely complex, it's based on incredibly simple principles, unlike almost everything in modern mathematics. In fact, anybody who can add and multiply can understand the principles on which it's based. You don't even have to subtract or divide, still less use logarithms or trigonometrical functions to comprehend how the Mandelbrot set is created. In fact, in principle, it could have been discovered any time in human history and not merely in 1980. But the problem is this: although it's only based on adding and multiplying, you have to carry out those operations millions, billions of times to create a complete set. And that's why it was not discovered until the era of modern computers.
Shalom, shalom, family. As always, at the beginning, we're going to say the Lord's Prayer. So bow with me as we say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father in heaven, honored be thy name. May thy kingdom come. May thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us each day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses, as forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us on a righteous path, and guard us from the evil one. In your name we pray. Amen. Sorry about that. I was running real fast, so I had to catch my breath. All right. So today's going to be a very, very deep study. What we're going to do is first, we're going to summarize off of some of the lives we just did. Now, we already did a live on about how the Akkadians have failed to the what they are called this is Guttins. They have failed to them, and then the Amorites had took over the area. The Amorites had a major control of the Babylonian area. If you have not seen, in fact, let me show it real fast. I just recommend this. If you haven't seen it, or if you did see it, it's good. But if you have not seen this, I'm going to quickly summarize it real fast. I'm just going to go to, right here. I'm going to go over here on, which one was it? Right here, where we had found out that JP58 was amongst the Amorites. Now, what's interesting is that the Amorites have a similar group. I'm going to point back to this in a little bit. In fact, I'll just leave it right there. The reason why I want to show you that is because the groups of the Amorites had certain lineages, and all those lineages can be displayed as thus. I'm going to show you all those lineages, all the lineages that can be displayed amongst the Amorites, 100%. If you've seen that video, we have showed that it's the same lineages that you see amongst the Turks, the same lineages that you see amongst many different groups. The reason why that's important is because we're going to come back to that. We're going to come back to that as we go through the summary of this. But first, we have to understand the next empire that came after the Amorites. What empire came after the Amorites? Well, it's an empire that's actually related to the empire that took down the Akkadians, which are the Guttins. How you say that? This is a Indo-European group that came from the Zagros Mountain. It is highly known that this group is a branch of Indo-European, right? Just a little bit about them and everything is that they came down, they were over here in the Zagros Mountain, and it said that they came down, took Akkad, right? They took this and set the area up. Everything was ready for the Amorites, and the Amorites took control of this area. After the Amorites were there was another empire that came there. After the Hittites came down, so the Hittites will be an empire that was over here. The Hittites came over here, knocked the Amorites out of the picture, and then drawed back. There was some group over here that was called the the Chaldeans. There was a group of Chaldeans here, but this spot was empty. There was another group that was actually related to the same group from the Zagros Mountain, came down, but they are going to be called the Kassites. So there's a little bit about the Kassites, because we're going to have a big connection to this, to Babylon, and it's going to have connections to even today. Very big connections with today. So I'm going to read something from here. I'm going to read the cities in the deep south broke off from Babylonian state. They became known as the first Sealand dynasty. And the Kassites and non-Babylonian people identifiable by their distinct language and thought to originate in the Zagros Mountains. So it's thought that this group originated also in the Zagros Mountains, right? East of Mesopotamia took place in regional fighting. So we're going to look at the history of this, because this is actually one of the longest lasting empires, if not the longest lasting empire before the Romans got there. So first we're going to go down on this note. We're going to talk about the Kassites. Go down here. So we already talked about the Amorites and everything like that. If you remember, the Amorite genetics and all those things, very important. What we found out. Let's go down here. So remember, we was talking about how they're connected with many different people, like the Canaanites and things like that. We'll get there when we start talking about genetics on the Kassites. As always, we always start with history. So I'm going to start here. 10. I'm going to show something on here.
So in the past, or the many program
Right here.
was Yarim I, the king of Yamad in northern Syria. By the mid-2nd millennium, the Amorites had more or less integrated with the other groups in Mesopotamia to the extent that they were no longer seen as outsiders. It's interesting to note that the term Amorite also shows up many times in the Old Testament of the Hebrew Bible. In this context, they're identified among the other tribal groups, such as the Canaanites and Hittites, as being residents of parts of Canaan before the arrival of the Israelites.
So you can see this little group here.
Too long, and opened up the region and sacked Babylon. They, however, didn't stay for too long, and opened up the realm for a new invader, the Kassites.
So right here, what you're hearing here at this part right here is talking about how the Hittites came and then the Kassites came in. I'm just going to skip this part because I just gave a summary for here, but that's just some information right here. So I'm going to go down right to this video here. So this video right here, I'm going to show in a different note, which is over here. This note will be in the description. Is what I'm going to show. I'm going to go down a little bit and just jump right to this one. This is very important. This is about the mixing of the nations. I'm going to show a little bit of this on YouTube. Go to this real fast.
By its northern neighbor, Assyria, and by Elam to the east. Kassite kings established trade and diplomacy with Assyria, Egypt, Elam, and the Hittites in the Kassite royal house and are married with their royal families. There were foreign merchants in Babylon and other cities, and Babylonian merchants were active from Egypt, a major source of Nubian gold, to Assyria and Anatolia. Kassite weights and scales, the measuring tools of commerce, and gold. There were foreign merchants in Babylon and other.
All right, just want to show those quick summary. Those are just a real fast, quick summary. The reason why is because before I dive in this note, I just want to get you a little familiar with some of these things before I dive into it. And here's another one, 255. I'm going to go to this.
Caucasus Mountains. From there, they slowly infiltrated into northern Mesopotamia and Syria. Truth be told, we don't even know what it was called by the people who spoke it. It's the Hittites who called it Hurri. Is an enigma. We don't know for sure what its linguistic affiliations were, so we have a hard time figuring out where the Hurrians originated before they showed up in the Near East. We know that Hurrian wasn't a Semitic language. We also know that it wasn't an Indo-European language. Truth be told, we don't even know what it was called by the people who spoke it. It's the Hittites who called it Hurrian. We do know that when they first appeared on the stage of Near Eastern history, the Hurrians lived in the Caucasus Mountains. From there, they slowly infiltrated into northern Mesopotamia and Syria, beginning in the Akkadian and Ur III periods during the late 3rd millennium BC. By the early 2nd millennium, they'd established a significant presence in the communities in the northern Fertile Crescent. They formed a substantial minority of the population in Syria and southeast Anatolia. We find Hurrian enclaves in Mari, Ebla, and other cities of the area, and individuals with Hurrian names show up in many other smaller towns. From this time on, Hurrian gods also frequently appear in religious texts, and Hurrian language literature slowly begins to develop.
All right, so I just want to show you those two things real fast, and now we're going to dive in. So I'm going to leave these here because actually these are going to be very important for going back on when we go to this note. Let me just go down here, all right? So I just have some little timestamps I'm going to go to as we go over this note. All right, let me just close this, and I'll leave that there. All right, so let's talk about the Kassites. So this is actually very important. They would be a group. Let me open up a map here, as it's always good to have a map. So it's very important to know about the difference between Iraq and Iran. There's a barrier called the Zagros Mountain, which makes a big difference of location. The Zagros Mountain makes a split between Iraq, which is in Mesopotamia, when you think where Abraham was, and Iran, which is above the Zagros Mountains, which that's going to be different civilizations that were over there. It's actually, it may not look like a major difference, but the area difference makes a big difference when noting. Now, this is the area where Abraham had left, right? He said his family was over here. He said he left here, and he said here. And remember, he told his servant to go get a woman from his homeland, right? Told him to go back up to his homeland and get one for Isaac. Same thing happened with Jacob. He went up there and got one of his relatives, and then they came down. But we have to understand that there's a very important part of history before a lot of the biblical narrative happened, that a lot of people from the north come down. They end up coming down into these areas, such as the Hurrians and different ones from the Zagros Mountains from Iran. They come down into these areas, and that's what we're going to note here. So that's what we just found out here. We can see from the Zagros Mountains, right? It's going to let us know that this dynasty that we're going to be looking at, this Kassite dynasty we're going to be looking at, is going to be an empire that took the land of Babylon. Here's a little quick, fast summary. This is very, very fast.
After that, Adesili became king of the Hittite Old Kingdom. For Egypt. Around 10 years later, Kassites gained control of Babylonia, some 25 years after the fall of Babylon to the Hittites.
All right, so it's that quick. So you see what it's saying here? So this is very important about this time, 15 BC, right? The Kassites gained control of Babylonia. Remember how we had pointed out how the Amorites had control of Babylonia, and now the Kassites, which was a people from the higher in, we see the Zagros Mountain here, the same as the Guttans, or how you say that, Guttans, they came down to. They're actually going to be highly related. That's very important. And they actually are going to be an empire that ruled the longest for a long time before the Babylonians ever ruled. There's no empire in this area or out of this area that ruled as long as the Kassites did in Babylon before Rome. That's very important to understand. They ruled for about 400, almost 500 years. So they're going to be a main power in this area. That's very important. After the Amorites, right? We already seen who the Amorites are. Now we're going to look at the Kassites and see who they are, who ruled in Babylonia. It's very important. You're going to note Assyria next to them. So the Kassites, now they didn't call themselves Kassite. It's going to be important for when we look at linguistics. The Akkadian word, the Kassu, is actually why they're called Kassites from the Akkadian word. But they themselves, from their own language, call themselves a different thing, which I'll just show you that real fast right here. Just to go a little bit into, because that's going to be important when we go back to linguistics and look at some comparisons with that. So we're going to obviously look at genetics synthetic Sunday today.
There were many Kassite loanwords that filtered into the Akkadian language, many of them dealing with specific types of horses and chariots, which actually sheds some light as to what the Kassites may have best been known for. In a letter that's been found between the Kassite king Kadashman Enlil II and the Hittite king Hattushili III, Hattushili states, and I quote, "In the land of my brother," meaning Babylonia, "horses are more plentiful than straw." End of quote. Speaking of language and various words, let's take a look at the name of these people, the Kassites. The word used to describe these semi-nomadic peoples in Akkadian was kashu, and this is where the word Kassite is derived from. The Kassites, though, called themselves Galzu, It's believed that they came from somewhere in the Zagros Mountains of what is today northwestern Iran. We first hear
All right, so you see how they talk about how they also connect them with the area of Iran, coming down from that area. A little more on that. Go to 1303.
the name of these people.
Go to something on here real fast. A little more.
There. Anyway, another interesting thing in this inscription is that the word Karduniash is used. From around this time onward, this term became synonymous with Kassite Babylonia, as we'll see in later documents, treaties, and letters from the same period. One example is a treaty with Assyria that reads, and I quote, King Kara Indash of Karduniash and King Ashurbel Nishishu of Assyria concluded a mutual accord and took a reciprocal oath, specifically on the matter of this boundary. End of quote. The term
All right, so just these little pieces. We're going to come back to these little pieces, as you know how it is, set it up for some pieces to come back to. So just to get a little understanding of the land. So this little area, this will be an area where the Kassites were. Now it's important to understand the Kassites would take over Assyria, and they would set up a vassal king. And then Assyria will also take over the Kassites area instead of a vassal king. And they were going through it. And that would actually cause them to be mixed. A lot of merging and mixing was happening over here. Now, it's already important to understand who are the Assyrians. We're going to look at this also when we connect these genetics. It's very important when we look at those things. They're all related. We're going to look at that, and it's very interesting. It's very interesting to see how they're related. So the empire of the Kassites was from 1595 BC to 1155 BC. That's very important. Now I'm going to show you a little more history, a little information. It is thought that the Kassites originated as a tribal group in the Zagros Mountain to the northeast of Babylonia. So that's very important. So they're from the northeast. They're going to be coming down. So northeast, that's north and east. So they'll be coming downwards and coming down into this area. That's very important to see. That's very, very important to see. Go back over here. Another place in the first millennia, the Kassites withdrew to Zagros Mountain. Now, this is very important. When the Kassites, when the time came for 1155 BC, they actually withdrew to the same place they came from. That's very important. In obviously in the first century millennial, right? We're talking the same time soon as this fell, right? The Kassites withdrew to the Zagros Mountains, where they opposed the eastward expansion of Assyrian power and paid tribute to Persia, right? In between Persia and Syria, right? They were conquered by Alexander the Great, but later regained their independence. That's very important because we're going to note that these people still exist, and we can follow their route and connect their genetics for who these individuals are. So these are not going to be connected to the Shemitic language. These are going to be real Indo-Europeans, ancient Indo-Europeans. This is going to be very important when looking at these things. Now, that's important because when we're connecting history and prophecy and things like that, we'll start to see something very common. There's nothing new under the sun. I'm going to show you something real fast. Here's possible people in relation. I'm going to show you something now, right here. So upon doing a little research for this, you'll see different groups where they'll say they will be connected to them and everything. So here will be one group. This will be a group that will be in the upper area, just to show a little bit of that right here. This one doesn't have any genetics, but you can see this will be over here in India. But I'm going to go to one that has a little more deeper meat to it. I'm going to go down here. Upon speaking with some people on these individuals, I'm going to show you something real fast. Okay, so I'm going to read you something here. The ancient history of, this is going to be Loristan, is closely intertwined with the rest of ancient Near East, right? Just letting us know it's going to be very connected to the ancient Near East. In the 3rd and 4th millennia BC, migrant tribes settled down in mountainous area of the Zagros Mountain. The Kassites, an ancient people, spoke neither an Indo-European nor Shemitic language. What does it mean that they didn't speak Indo-European nor Shemitic? They had, just like how what happened at the Tower of Babel, right? The Tower of Babel, a lot of people had different languages. This doesn't mean that they're not one of these people. It just means that they speak a different language. They have a different dialect. So that's important. So no one can say, oh, these are actually just Shemites or things like that. They didn't speak Shemitic. These will be the same people. So following the linguistics, following the genetics, following the migration patterns by history, it's going to give us a lot of information. So originated in Loristan. So they also originated in that same area. They would control Babylonia. After the fall of the Babylonian Empire, which we talked about, the Amorite Empire that fell, which we had seen earlier on, the Amorites had lost their area, but you're going to notice that they're going to be fairly the same. You can see right here, remember how we talked about the Gutens? The things that I'm showing you, things that I'm saying, I'm not just saying it for no reason, because we're going to come back to certain things. See what's going on here? It says the Medes absorbed the indigenous inhabitants. Now, who are the Medes, right? Mahdi is a son of Japheth. That's very important. Absorbed the indigenous inhabitants of the region, primarily the Kassites. So the Medes were filled with Kassites, as well as remember how we talked about that group? The Gutens. So we're going to look at this and get an idea of these groups that merged and stayed in this area. So it's going to talk about this group that stayed in there, right? They were known to have horses. They actually worshiped the horse. It's very important when it comes to that of them. We're going to look at some genetic information. Let me actually close this. Go down a little bit just to get a little history. Connecting the tide, as you can see. We're going over that. We talked about a little bit of them, right? You can see how they could absorb that people, how we had talked about that. A little bit more. Lurs. And now remember, remember how they say they fled away and they went into this area right here. So this little area over here is very important. We're going to be connecting the history over here. So Lurs, I'm going to go down real fast and show you something that's said here. There's a little more that's talked about on the Kassites. Lurs are a mixture of Aboriginal Iranian tribes originating from Central Asia and pre-Iranic tribes of Western Iran, such as Kassites. So remember, see what it's talking about, the Kassites? It says that the Kassites, whose homeland appears to have been in what is now Loristan, and remember that group? Gutens, the Gutens, so how you say that, right? And look how it's going to have close affiliation. We're going to look at the Elamites. I'm going to show you later on the Elamites genetic just to get a little quick taste of something. This is not a long note. It's not a long note, but we're going to look at some very interesting things. But I'm going to show you something that I found just to jump a little ahead, but I'm going to go right back to what we were just talking about. There's some very interesting studies that's found, and there is a very interesting connection of the Elamites, ancient Elamites, having the YAP lineages. So we're going to look at that a little later when that time comes. But let's keep going back up so we don't leave what we're doing, right? We were just on right here, up here a little bit. Lurs. So you can see what we're talking about, the Kassites, whose homeland appeared to have been in what is now Loristan. And right there, remember he had looked at that on the map. In accordance with geographic and archaeological matching, some historians argue that the Elamites were proto-Lurs and stuff like that. We're going to look at some things like that as well. Obviously, getting a good idea on when Elam falls is going to be important. We're going to note some very interesting things as we go over these things, because we're going to look at some deep history. So I just want to show you this. The reason why I want to show you this is because you can see it'll just talk right here. This person right here states that they are closely related to the Kurds, but now this is very important too. We're going to look at that too, because we got connections with that in certain places. We're going to look at those things when we start looking at the genetics and things like that. So I'm going to go down a little bit. So we got to find out what exactly are they. So the best way to get a good understanding is looking at genetics. Now, we're going to be looking at a little bit of the Lurs, right? And what are their genetics? And it's going to show us different genetics. Now, I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to show you. So it's going to give us some genetics, right? Just letting us know about certain lines and everything, different ones and everything. Go down just to get a clear understanding. So you'll notice here, what will we see? We'll see R lineages, which we just seen right there. So R lineages, J lineages. We'll see some Q lineages, some T lineages, some G lineages, some E lineages. That's very important. The reason why is because we're going to put it together by the females, and we're going to get a good idea of what's going on there when I say the females. Now, this is all the lineages that you will see there. Now, let me state something real fast, what you're looking at here. So the genetics of those groups, these are going to be the genetics of those groups, is what you're seeing here. Also, we're connecting another group. I'm going to show you this one. I probably didn't show this one already. The reason why is because you see this word right here. I'm going to come back up real fast, but first let me go down so I'll show you why I'm showing you this word. The reason why is because we're going to also be connecting it with linguistics. For example, ancestry study with the word Kass. Now, we have certain groups with the word Kass still lingering today. It's in connection to this. We're going to look at something with this. So Eastern German, Kass. You can see a nickname for this one right here. I don't know how you pronounce that. Catch, something like that. You can see right here, Okaz. You can see blackbird. You can see that as a word for a shrewd person, right? And sometimes you'll see it in names of those who are descended from Ashkenaz, from the Jewish Ashkenazic. It's an Ashkenazic connection. We're going to connect that with some very important connections when we come back. So the reason why I want to show you that is because in connection, connecting that with family trees and family lines, you can see some major connections. Here's some connections right here. Last names, you see a lot of individuals with the type of last name. It traces very far back. It's what you can see right here, Eastern German, also Kass. It's a German last name, but you see it also mixed with the Jewish Ashkenazic last name. That's very important because we had talked about that before. A lot of Germans, Ashkenaz, they're fairly related, despite the fact that one has a different religion. We're going to come back to that. The reason why I'm putting those there is for the linguistic understanding. So going back up here, the reason why I went to that is because of this. Remember I showed you those names right there? This is what we're looking at here. So what we're actually looking at is a certain group of people, right? Getting a little understanding on them, and we can look at their genetics and everything. What's interesting about it is that the same genetics that are given, when I say the same genetics, the same groups of genetics that are given for the ones that say they are related to the ancient Kassites who were Babylonians, they seem to have the same group. In fact, what's interesting about that, I'm going to close these ones real fast so that these aren't in the way. I'll leave this one here. Going back over here. So the reason why that's important is because in comparison, the Kurds, the Assyrians, the Jews, the Turkestan, they are fairly related. Let me show you something when I say fairly related. Let me go to something here. 55 and 20. Right here. And I'm going to show you something real fast, and then we're going to talk about what's the word I'm looking for? Haplogroups. We're going to talk about how groups are connected, and the reason why that's important is because there's nothing new under the sun. That's the reason why it's important. That's what I found out while doing a lot of genetic studies. While doing a lot of genetic studies, I found out that it's almost like a repeated. There's a lot of repeating cycles. Right. There's no like surprise. Here's a new person that came. Where's this person from? But almost every person is connected, as the biblical narrative shows. Every person is connected to Adam. But what we notice is that these different groups with different names, different religions, but same genetics. But let me show you something.
Populations, when you look at our overall DNA. But when you plot the Y DNA of men, for example, this shows you Armenians in red and Assyrians in blue. And when you plot who is A, who is J, who is J2, R1B, you get almost the same distribution, which is mind-blowing and shows you that initially we were the same people.
All right, so did you just hear what he just said? Now let's look at what he's talking about here. What does he mean that they were the same people? Let's get a good understanding of what's going on here. I just want to move this little red line here, but I don't know how to do that. Remove the red line on this thing. But I'll just show you by clicking it and just repeating what's there. So you see these groups here. You see what you see here. You see these E1B, this E1B. You see these groups as I. You see these groups right here, the F. All these going to be under F. Everything on this side are all connected to F. E doesn't come from F, but F makes all these. You got your G, I, J, L, N, Q, R, T. Let me show you something. You see what you see remember how I told you how people are fairly related? So look at what you see right here. I have made this before because I noticed that there's always a common mix of groups, which is fairly interesting. Just wait till it load real fast and that won't take too long. Okay, so what you're looking at here is the same Y chromosomes. So going back, and I'm going to show you how many connections we have when I say same Y chromosomes. I'm going to show you with the right now I'm showing you with the Assyrians. I'm going to show you with the Armenians. I'm going to show you with the Canaanites. I'm going to show you that they all have the same male lines. Remember, these are different male lines, but they're all going to be related by female lineages. That's very important, which are usually Indo-European female lineages, which I'm going to show you that right now. So you see this E, you see the J, you see the Q, and you see all these groups, the T, you see those things, and the E, all these things. The same mix that you see there is the same mix that you see in the Turks and the Ashkenaz. You can see Ashkenaz, the J, the E, the R, the G, the Q, the T, the I. You can see the same thing with the Turks because this is a combination with the Turkish groups and everything. Here's an idea, the Uyghur Turks project, what you're seeing right there. You can see the same groups, I. You can see the E, R. You can see the N, Q. You can see the L. You can see the J. You can see every lineage, right? T. You can see every single lineage that you see in different groups. Now I'm going to show you with the Canaanites. Let's go to the Canaanites now. Okay, so here's a Canaanite. So just to show you that this is going to be from the Canaanites. I had showed this before. This is from Cell. There is an information with only 5 results, but if you look a little closer, there's a lot of information for the ancient Canaanites. Here's that on the ancient Canaanites here. I'll let that open, which is just loading. Otherwise, I'll just show it on this. Close that. Yep. All right, so right here, we had talked about this before with the ancient Canaanites. And remember, I told you about the female lineages is the European lineages that we see today. The same ones that we see today that they would deny that was with them long ago. But like we say, it's right there. So remember how we said what lineages were in there? Again, I'll try to make it like maybe a hermetic, although it sounds the same. So you can see what's going on there. You got a low percentage of all these. Now you see what's A. This is very important because if you look very closely at the Ashkenazi mix, you also see some A's in there. That's very important. So E, you see these lineages here. These are gonna be coming from here. These coming from here, right? You get your E in dominance, where you get a high percentage right here. So you can see these are just like 0, nothing. But you want to note the ones that's a little higher, the ones that's going to be reach more than 5%, right? You can see your E. You can see all these different lineages, G, the ones of F. F creates the ones of G. Remember I had talked about that before? I had talked about the F lineage creates everything underneath it, right? That's very important because if F creates everything underneath it, but doesn't create anything of DE, nor A and B, that means F can't be Noah. We know that without a doubt, that F can't be a lineage of all lineages. That's important. Of all modern people lineages. Because remember, what we're looking at when we look at the haplogroup tree, we're looking at modern lineages. These are all modern people that we can find today. So right here, you can see your F It's going to create everything under it. Your G, H, I, J, K, element of PQRS, TUV, whatnot. TUV. T stops at T. So you can see right here, it creates all these lineages underneath it. But in these groups, you're going to note certain combinations, certain high levels of combinations, which is your E, your G, your I, your J. You can sometimes see L, but that sometimes is low. But then you see your R. You can see Q sometimes in there. You can see T. So hermetic, I'm just going to say hermetically, E, I, you got your G, or E, G, I, J, L, Q, R, T. E, G, I, K, L, Q, R, T. So remember that. I'm going to show you something real fast again. So remember how I showed you with all these? You can see E, G, right? Right here, you don't see I on this one. This one has an I right here because that one's also a low one. So these ones of these Turks don't have it, but these Turks do. They have I, E, G, I. You can see Q, obviously J. You see your J's there, and then you get your T, which is right there. And then you can note, going back to let me see this open here. You can see right here, E. You can see different groups when we scroll. What else is there? This one is one part of the Canaanites. I got to open up another one. Let me open up the other side with the Canaanites, because the Canaanites have a lot of information, a lot of genetics to it. In fact, before I even go there, let me go over here and show you something. Now, remember how I showed you the Amorites and all those things? So you can see I got a few things to show you. So right here, remember how I showed you the Canaanites and everything? What's important about when you're connecting people, always also look at the female lineage. A lot of times when people look at Y chromosome, they miss the female lineages, which is very great for connecting peoples. So right here, these are your common European lineages. All these are going to be under R. So you can see R will make a lot of these right here. They're under N. You can see right here, the groups that you see here. So your N, J, H, U, K, things like that. The reason why I'm showing you that is because this, what you're seeing right here, right. Let me actually open it up. This is going to be ancient European lineages. I'm going to show you real fast what it is. The reason why this is important is because it let me close that one, not that, but this. I just want to show you where it's coming from. And I'll just show you it, and then it'll just show right here, I'm sure. I'm gonna show you. This is pretty much from ancient Europe. I'm talking really, really ancient, like very old. And I also show that once this pop up. So you can see here, just to get an idea on the dates, right there, you see 15,000. You can see what's going on there. Really, really, really early. And what do you see? You see your G groups. You see I groups. You can see these are going to obviously come from F, which you'll know F is on here as well, which go down a little bit. You can see here F groups. And then you notice that you'll have here, remember I showed you when I showed you over here, let me close that. The European groups. So right here, these are the Canaanite groups. And then I showed you with the female lineages. And you can see over here, these will be the female lineages over here. So remember, you can see your T, U, K, H, J, stuff like that. Those are mtDNA. The same thing you see over here, T. Obviously, you're going to have your U's there, your K, H. These are classic, we say, European lineages. That's very important. And these are early Europeans with the early lineages, the G's. Remember how I showed you on the tree? The earlier lineages from F are F, G, H. When you want to look for old European, you're going to see F, G, H, also with the connection of I and J. with those things. These are going to be the earlier ones. So that's what you're seeing here is the more earlier ones, the G's, the F's, some of the I's there. And you can see your H's there. And then obviously your F's there. So you can see the reason why I'm showing you this is because I want you to understand first that when you want to root these things to where they're from, that's going to be very important for noting these groups. So the same MT lineages, and then you're going to see the same male lineages on the most part. So you can see what's going on here. I'm going to go back over here and see if I showed you this. Okay, so let me go back over here. So the reason why I want to show you that is because these same groups of Y males, you'll commonly see them Babylon, Assyria, almost every empire was not really race-based. In fact, a lot of empires started to merge early, which I'm going to talk about too, what the Kassites were doing. They were all calling each other brothers. For example, let me show you something back on this thing. Or was it this thing? Is this thing, in fact, on this side. Let me show you something on what they were doing. Let me pause that. And I'm going to go down. So when you think of ancient empires, that's kind of like the mix that they were doing.
Southeast Anatolia.
We don't see a lot of
Hurrian enclaves and
other mixes, but that's kind of like a classic what's the word I'm looking for? Indo-European mix, but it also has that E1B1B, which is the Arabian lineage that actually went upwards, that merged with them. Here's what happened. You can see what they call each other brother.
The Kassites were part of what has been called the Club of the Great Powers, a network of empires that dominated the Near East during the middle and late second millennium. Members of the club were close to the 14th century. The Kassites were part of what has been called the Club of the Great Powers, a network of empires that dominated the Near East during the middle and late second millennium. Members of the club were closely linked to one another by diplomatic exchanges. The club's roster included New Kingdom Egypt, Hatti, the Kassites, and eventually Assyria. Equality of the member monarchs was indicated by the fact that they addressed one another as brothers. Their relationship indicated by the fact that they addressed one another as brothers. Their relation.
So they would call, now they would be from different nations, but they would call themselves brothers. And what empires are we talking about? We're talking about the main empires during the time of before Israel left out of the wilderness. Before Israel left out of the wilderness, we're talking about these empires were calling each other brother. Right? I was talking about that before when I was talking about with the Amorites and different groups like that. And I was talking about how they're all connected genetically. When I say genetically is by the female lineage, but they were calling each other brother because that's what the ancient empires would do. They would give their daughters and it would count as a unity. Do you know that? Let me tell you something really interesting. Do you know that that's actually the example of why Christ was given? That he actually was given through the female line, right? Being of God, given through the female line, uniting man with God, right? That's another depth of understanding when you look at the ancient reason for that, the ancient reason why that was done. But this is one of those big major things that ancient empires would give their daughters, and they'll become like one, and they'll start to call each other brothers. Now, I'm gonna go a little bit deeper into this. As this is extremely deep. This is actually extremely deep. Just to answer some questions before we move further. If you want to see a little bit on the Greeks and on the Romans, because I didn't show the connection with the Amorites yet. I'm going to show you something with the connection to Amorites. But if you go down, there's a video right here. Home of Rome, you can see a lot of connections with the Romans and everything. But let me show you something with the Amorites. Let me show you a very interesting connection with the Amorites.
Of the neighboring Amorite states of
all right, so I always put little time.
Right?
Let's see if I can pause this. I always put little time stamps because it could be fairly interesting with little time stamps. Let me go to something and show you something now. I'm going to show you something on a timestamp. got your, remember the female lineages, H, J, K, N, T, U, things like that. You can see this in the land of Amorites. What's going on there? H, K, J, T, U. You see what's going on there? And remember, they're still with the J. They're still with the J. That's very important. With the Ks, these are the lands of the Amorites. This is very important. This is very important to understand that the lands of the Amorites, you see these genetics here, it was a European dominance in the land of the Amorites. Now, that's very important because truth is truth. So the reason why I want to show you that is because what I'm showing you is that the Babylonians, the Assyrians, in fact, I'm gonna just read it off of someone's comment. I've been saying this for a while, and someone who lives there got their genetics checked, and they can see that they're connected with fairly a lot of people. They said something very interesting that I agreed to, and I had the screenshot. And it's a true fact. And that's what I'm going to show you as we go over these things, as I'm also going over the Babylonian peoples and everything. Let me go down to that screenshot. So right here, what this person said, he says, I am an Assyrian from Iran. Sumerian, Akkadian, Amorites, Assyrians, Babylonians are all blood related. This person saying this was saying it unbiasedly, and that's what we're doing as well. We're doing it unbiasedly and showing these things in truth. Now, obviously, you can never mix a male. That's very important. You can never mix a male, but you can make them one by the female lineages. And then they start to look the same. They start to call each other brother because they look the same and everything. And all these things come to pass as prophesied. So let me go over here as we're just starting to get deep in. So you see these genetics. So what I'm saying is the Kassites are the same people as the Ashkenaz, the same as the Turkish groups. They're the same genetically. All of them, all the groups, the Kassites, both of them were ruling in Babylonia, right? When I say the Amorites, they were ruling in Babylonia before the Kassites were there, and they ruled for a long time. And then the Kassites got there, and they ruled for a long time. And their relative Y chromosome and mtDNA is fairly relatable. All of it's fairly relatable. All of them are fairly one. So, and also linguistically, you have a lot of connections. That's very major when connecting these things. So remember how I showed you all these lineages are R1B, R1A, RI, E, J, G, N, T, right? I showed you them how they're all also in the Assyrians. They're also in the Turks and the Ashkenaz, right? You can see the same groups that I just showed you on this list are R1A, R1B, I, E, J, G, N, T. Same thing. You can see when we go over here, you can see this is actually R1B. This is R1A, G, Q, T, I, E, J. The same groups, the same exact groups. This is very important because it actually is going to give us a perfect understanding of what's really going on in these lands and in the world that we're living in today. So remember, Kassites and Amorites were the original Babylonians. So that's very important. So very, very important. When connecting those things together, you're going to get a good understanding. So back to the Kassites, a little bit of the Kassites. Let's just see what they say a little bit about them. You can see a little bit about the Kassites, just say right here. However, the arrival of the Kassites has been connected to the contemporary migrations of Indo-European peoples. You see what's going on there? So the Kassites, remember, they don't speak Semitic. And they don't speak the common Indo-European language like cuneiform and stuff like that. But they have their own little language. But they're genetically the same, right? They came down into the Levant, right? They came down from the Zagros Mountains, right? And they're going to be settling in Mesopotamia, especially Babylon, right? And it is possible that they were dominated by an Indo-European elite similar to the Mitanni. You see how I just showed you a little bit of Mitanni and the Hurrians, who ruled over the Eurasian speaking Hurrians of Asia Minor. Now the reason why I'm telling you this is important because what I showed you earlier I don't know why this thing taking a long time to open. Let me close it. Sometimes I gotta keep my eye on the page when opening these Google Earth tool. So the reason why I want to show you this is because at the Caucasian mountain, they call it the Caucasian or the Caucasus mountain, where the Hurrians were, right? You're going to have people from that area, from the Hurrians and from the Zagros mountains. Now, what's interesting about that is the same thing they say about the Canaanites. They say the Canaanites are a people that came from the Caucasus mountain, from the Zagros and the Caucasus mountain, right? I showed that earlier before. In fact, right on here, I'll just go down a little bit and show you that. I did a study. We did a little study on that result that they had brought out, talking about the Canaanites were a people from up here, right? The Zagros mountain, right? The Zagros mountains over here and the Caucasus mountains over here. And we had talked about that when they linked them and everything, right? You can see they talk about that in different posts. I'll just read one of these. You can see right here. Remember how they said the Ashkenazi Jews were roughly 70 to 60% of the contribution. And I told you when we talked about it that this was a group that came from the Zagros mountain. I'll just scroll down slowly because it's more easier to look at these notes on a phone. Because actually I made these notes for phones. Now look what it says right here. It just talks about the Canaanites. They say they closely resembled some of the pottery that was in the Caucasian mountains, right? The Caucasus mountains. And it says, I'm going to go down a little bit. It says that the Canaanites' names derive from the Hurrians, right? So they also got connection to the Hurrians and everything, a non-Semitic language originating in the Caucasus. So you see what's going on there? Go down a little bit. So that's just saying where they came from. Just go down a little bit, a little more. Just to show you a little bit of the sayings of the Zagros mountains. Just letting us know what group was mixed with that. So right here, you can see where it talks about the Canaanites. When we just talk about the Zagros and the Caucasus mountains, it says right here, roughly contribution to the area, Neolithic inhabitants, and from a group that hailed or ruled from the Caucasus or the northwestern Zagros mountains, right, in today's Iran. You see what's going on there? So you see how many connections is starting to connect? So a lot of connections here, very, very important. It goes a little bit more into it, into the Zagros mountains and everything. I just want to show you. I have one of these pictures here. Let me just show that real fast of the actual barrier. In fact, I think it's down here a little bit. So right here. All right, so you can hear a little bit about it. We did a lot of videos on the Canaanites and everything. You can see right here, just talked about that contribution that came down from the Caucasus or Zagros mountains. You can see right here, the Zagros mountains. Everything above this is what they're saying, north of the Zagros mountains, so Iran and the Caucasus. You can see we had looked at this a little earlier. We had looked at the genetics and what they said. European people might have originated from Anatolia during the Neolithic era as samples from ancient bodies recovered in both regions share genetic similarities, right? This is very important. That was very important. We were talking about how a lot of them are very related, and we have found out this, which was very interesting. Remember how I showed you with this little study? Well, that study that I showed you that the go up real fast and I'll go back down. Remember that study I showed earlier of how the groups are related to the Assyrians? And remember, we're talking the Assyrian rulers, and this is going to be the Assyrian rulers, the rulers of ancient times. So right here, going a little bit down. So obviously, during the time of Assyria's great rule, Israel was in the wilderness. So you can see these little groups here. Notice that this is going to be the Assyrians. So it's connecting. You can see right here. What is it connecting? Assyrian and Armenian Y DNA. Now, watch what it says here. They connect the Assyrian and Armenian. Remember they said they were the same people? Remember they said at first they were the same people? Let me show you something that's said here that's very important to understand. And this is why it's important when going over these things carefully to just, note some things that may not seem important at first, but is important. Let me go down right here. Watch what it says here. So this is going to be from right here. I'm going to go down a little bit, and this is what it says. This is what it says right here. It says that, in fact, I'm going to click it so I can read it better. So remember how I showed you the Armenians and the Assyrians were related, right? It said at first they were the same people. Is what that video said. It said they were first the same people, which I showed you in this little video. I don't know if this was it. Yeah. Remember how I showed you that? Right? Just to get a quick reminder, I'm gonna play it real fast just so you can hear what he's saying here, just so you can see that all this is true. In fact, this thing, I'll refresh it. Let that load in and refresh this real fast, and then get a quick summary of this. That's right. How many groups are in the J lineage? A lot of groups. In fact, almost all of them have a
of
J.
men, for example. This shows you Armenians in red and Assyrians in blue. And when you plot who is A, who is J, who is J2, R1B, you get almost the same distribution, which is mind-blowing and shows you that initially we were the same people.
So you see how he said they're the same. They were the same people. Now listen to this. In fact, there is no major Y chromosome haplogroups found among Ashkenazi Jews that are not also found among Armenians, and vice versa, which indicate the source population of these groups, while diverse to begin with, were in geographic proximity. That's very important. They were in geographic proximity. And if you start to look at the history of the Armenians, you'll find out that they are actually connected to the Hurrians, and then connecting them all the way back to Mitanni and all the way back to its ancient roots to where they're from. And that's very important when connecting them in the groups of the Zagros Mountains and the genetics of all those things. So them having the same genetics over here and then some over here being connected, they're all actually would be a group of a mix of an Indo-European people that mixed with women, that mixed up with the groups of the women. That's very important because we also can note that during like the time of Moses, we can notice that he had an R1B lineage, right? He was an Egyptian leader, but he also had a European female. So in Europe, there were rulers that were European and having European females. So it's very important. A lot of them were actually darker skin, still being of European, which we talked about with pigmentation don't represent people. That's very important. But the haplogroups would represent them. So that's why I showed you that. The reason why is because you can see in the connection to these, saying that they originated from the Zagros Mountains and everything, the Kassites and everything, same story, same connection, because it's the same genetics. Everything's the same. Almost every last thing is exactly the same. Linguistically, genetically, factually is what you're seeing there. Now let me show you why I'm showing that. So there's nothing new under the sun. The reason why I'm showing this is because there's nothing new under the sun. So there's nothing new under the sun. So you can see what it's saying here. Several Kassite leaders and deities bore Indo-European names, and it is possible that they were dominated by an Indo-European elite similar to the Mitanni, who ruled over the Hurrian, obviously the Hurrians and everything in Asia Minor. So we had talked about that. Let me go down a little bit. So it's very important. Japheth had a lot of power in the biblical narrative. A lot of times when people think of the biblical narrative, they only think about Ham or Shem, but they don't think a lot about Japheth. And they'll think Japheth only came during the time of the Romans. But actually, they had a lot of power in the area. The original homeland of the Kassites is not well established. It appeared to have been located in the Zagros Mountain. And what is now, remember we had to look at Loristan province in Iran, right? We looked at their genetics too, same genetics and everything. However, the Kassites were, like you can see right here and everything, they didn't speak the same languages as a lot of the people, but they had their own language, long story short. Go down a little bit. Now I'm going to show you something. So this is actually important to understand about the Kassites. They worship horses. The Kassites were actually a group that worshiped horses, which I'll read it right off the site or right off the quote from the site. The chariot and the horse, which the Kassites worshipped, first came into use in Babylonia at this time. So when the Kassites came there, which is actually important to understand, the Indo-European groups, they had a lot of horses. Think like the Scythians, the Scythians, things like that. They had a lot of horses, but the Kassites also had horses. In fact, they worshipped them. Now, the reason why that's important, because I'm going to show you something that a lot of people aren't being aware of. So remember how I showed you with the connection of these names? There's a reason why I was showing you the connection of these names. So this name, the Kass, different things like that, the genetics, all those things, right? Connecting the genetics with the names and things like that. The reason why, the J, and all these different lineages and everything with the T and all these different lineages and all those and whatnot with the linguistics. The reason why is because I want you to see something. I want to show you something. This is the Kass. The Kass is a Ashkenazi group, or in the sense of they have power in Israel and in Germany. Now, the Kass group, what's important about the Kass group, notice the name, notice the symbol. Why a horse? Why this name? And remember how I showed you the linguistic connection with these things? One more time, going back to the linguistics again. Right here, we can see different people's names. In fact, I'll just go to this one right here. And then remember, he looked at the genetics connected with that name and everything and all those things. So a little bit of the peoples. We'll click this. Now the reason why is because I'm going to show you something. Babylon is rising again. This is very important. So Kass family name. Remember, we looked at that. That name right there, going connection to the Germans and everything, right? European Germans, right? And then even connection with the Ashkenaz. Same genetics. Both of them the same genetics, same thing. Very important. But let me close this. Just wanted that for the reminder. And
after that,
close that. Go back down. All right, so let me show you something. So remember how I showed you how they worship horses, right? They worship horses, right? That's another connection. But let's see what's going on here. I want to show you this because this is very important. So if you don't know, there is in fact, let me play this on YouTube because some reason when I play it on these notes, they lag or something. I'm gonna go to YouTube. But the reason why I'm showing you this is because if you haven't seen, there's a Babylon rising right now. But first, let me show you this group that's part of the project. That's part of the whole thing. So this is called the Kass group. They're called the Kass group. So what they are, what they call themselves. Now, notice what you're seeing here. You're going to see this place. Now, they call it Luna Kass, but now it's actually called Magic Kass. This is actually very important. These are going to have connection with very important things. It's going to be a place, a merchant city that's connecting what they call Arabs and what they call Jews together. I want you to think about that real fast. And this place is actually called Magic Kass today. That's what it's called, Magic Kass. We're gonna look at it. See this place called Designer City? I'm gonna show you something with Designer City that's very important. Okay, so they was over here building it and everything. I'm gonna just turn it down because we don't need the sound or nothing. Kass Grand Hall. Kass Grand Hall. And I'm gonna show you who owned these things and all these things. It's very important. Operated in Georgia. Right? Remember we looked at that? Georgia, that's the Caucasus. This is Georgia. Okay. Obviously, these are just little pieces, right? Get a little understanding what they've been doing. Obviously, if you want to dig a little more deeper into this video, here's the owner. We're gonna look at him. We're gonna get a little ideas of this stuff and see why are we looking at this, right? Why are we looking at what they're building and stuff? City box, couple different things. In fact, they're trying to build a city. They're trying to connect cities together, and we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about what they're doing right now. I'm gonna show you what they're doing right now. So let me close this. And let's go over here. Let me close this. All right, so if you never heard of it, Designer City is short. shorten D city. Does that sound familiar? D city, the great city, the great city, the great city Babylon, mystery Babylon. It's called D city. Doesn't that sound like D city? If I said D city, we're gonna go to D city. D city, D city, the city. No, D city, D city, not the city, the designer city. But let me show you something so you can see what's going on here. So show you something very, very important.
This luxurious European-style shopping center sits in the Judean desert, about 10 miles outside Jerusalem.
Our dream is that when people buy apartment or build apartment or house, they will come for some place in this city and they will find all what they need for the house or for the apartment.
120 stores are already open here, and 50 more are planning to do the same. With prices ranging from inexpensive to luxury, they say you can find anything you want for your home right here at D-City.
Furniture, kitchen, tiles, all what people need for the house, they can find here.
Hanina Revach is CEO of the Design City or D-City Mall.
Only when people come here, they really understand it's very special, very different. It's not only place to come to buy, it's really place that they can come, they can enjoy.
Situated on the road to the Dead Sea, the mall offers restaurants, a hotel, and even a nearby theme park.
I talk about tourists. And ensure that when we have some options like this, that we have very good restaurant and it's on the way for the Dead Sea, all of them will stop here, will come to enjoy in this place.
D-City is built in what much of the world calls a settlement, although Israelis as well as Palestinians from the West Bank can set up shop here.
I started to looking for a shop here, maybe to open something new, maybe to open something to go along with the theme. I decided to open a gadgety luxury gift shop that gives answers to alternative of perfumes and t-shirts and standard regular gifts.
Luai Gul, a Palestinian from Jerusalem, owns a gift shop in Ramallah and now is opening one at D-City.
To be honest, we share interests, we share businesses, we share life, basically.
This is the 10th Nicoletti store in Israel.
We opened before 2 months here, and Nicoletti, the Marabel, Hood, because the Palestinians and Jews together here, and we sell for a lot of Palestinians. They can come to here.
All right, the next one I play, I'm not going to play it on this because it always lags like that. But this is a city. What this is a city in between cities, connecting cities together. That's what in fact, is a mall that's in the center. And what the mall is stacked with enough stuff that anyone who moves there can build a house there. In fact, that's what they want. They want people to build around this city. It's very important. Remember what the scripture said when it talks about a merchant city? And remember, this city is in Israel and is actually connecting these together. And it also has a place called Magic Kass. Now, I'm going to turn this down. The reason why I want you to see this is because this is important to understand. There's nothing new under the sun. Understand what I'm saying? There's nothing new under the sun. This one, I don't know why I just played it on here. It always lags when I try to play the video on this thing. But this is what the place is. It's a theme park connected with that place called Magic Kass. Now, a lot of places have the word Kass on it. Now, I want to show you something. This is what the place looks like. You know what this looks like? You know what these walls look like? And this little center area right here. And then you enter into the area here. You know what this looks like? Looks just like Babylon. Looks just like Babylon with the walls on the side. And the area right here where you enter in, where it has all types of different people going into this area. Looks just like Babylon, don't it? Looks just like a modern Babylon, don't it? Be honest. Look at the top. Look what they're doing there. You think this design's an accident? You think this little open area, this little design is accident? They call it the design city. They call this the designer city. You know, Babylon, if you look at the actual building, they had that same design. Right? They had those same little spiked little design right there. See what's going on there? It would have the same little design, right? See what's going on there? This is another angle of it and everything. You can see the little design right there, those little tower things on the top, little castle points, right? You know what those are for? A lot of times when they have archers, The archers will use those to shoot bows, so they have a defense and they also can shoot. So that's a little information there. So what they need that there just for designer city, ladies and gentlemen. So this right here, what you're seeing here, looks just like Mystery Babylon. Got linguistic connection, genetic connection, multiple pieces of connection. Ask yourself, are you ready? Are you 100% ready? If this is it, if this is really Babylon rising and all the nations gather together in this little city, this little area, and becomes the main area of power, are you ready for the season? Are you ready for the season of change? So you can see right here, just a little bit, little Babylon. What was Babylon? A city that was built and a lot of other cities connected with it. So you can see what's going on. And that's what D City is. That's what they want. They want you to build a place along this place and unite them all together. Let's turn this, because I can tell it's making that little shatter sound. So right here, the reason why I want you to see this is because I want you to understand what's going on, right? Just note, there's nothing new under the sun. So I'm going to show you something real fast on here. I was just showing this a little earlier. Just a little, remember I showed you about the Kassites? Just a little quick history real fast of the Kassites. Remember, they was the longest lasting empire. They ruled in Babylon the longest than anyone else. But before I show you this one, let me just show you some interesting timestamps I timestamped on here. Just some interesting history.
As Mitanni was rising to power in the northern Fertile Crescent, to the south, a people named the Kassites moved into the vacuum left behind by the Hittite sack of Babylon in 1595 and united Babylonia under their authority. The Kassites appear in Babylonian records from the early years of the second millennium BC, both as mercenaries and as small groups living on the fringes of northern Mesopotamia and raiding cities in the region. Like the Hurrians, the Kassites' ethnic associations are a puzzle. They show no obvious relationship to any other peoples, and although little of their language has been preserved, we know enough of it to say that they were neither Semitic nor Indo-European. It was in the decades following the Hittite raid on Babylon that the Kassites emerged from obscurity and took control of central and lower Mesopotamia. The first Kassite king about whom anything is known to us, other than his name, is Agum II in the 16th century. He ruled central Mesopotamia and the mountains east of the Tigris, as well as southern Mesopotamia, except for the Sealand, which was the home of the Chaldeans. Agum II's successor twice removed, Ulamburiash, succeeded in adding the Sealand to the Kassites' empire, making Mesopotamia a unified whole. He then took the title King of Babylonia, King of Sumer and Akkad, King of the Kassites, King of Karduniash. After the conquest of the Sealand, the Kassites launched naval expeditions down the Persian Gulf and conquered strategic locations like Bahrain, which they ruled directly through Kassite governors rather than through local client kings. But their attention was in the decades following the Hittite raid on Babylon that the Kassites emerged from obscurity and took control of central and lower Mesopotamia. The first Kassite king about whom anything is known to us, other than his name, is Agum II in the 16th. The Kassites were part of what has been called the Club of the Great Powers, a network of empires that dominated the Near East during the middle and late second millennium. Members of the club were closely linked to one another by diplomatic exchanges. The club's roster included New Kingdom Egypt, Hatti, the Kassites, and eventually Assyria. Equality of the member monarchs was indicated by the fact that they addressed one another as the Kassite Empire finally collapsed in the late 13th and 12th centuries. The most fundamental cause was geopolitical. Babylonia was exposed to powerful enemies on three sides.
All right, we're gonna once I show you this, I'm gonna talk about Elam. But the reason why I wanted to show you those quick summaries, because I wanted to give you that one more summary to understand that, remember, we know that the Amorites are the same genetically as Ashkenaz. It's very important to understand the world has a wool over its eyes. They can't even see what they're doing. They don't even know what's going on. It's happening right in front of them. The same groups, the Amorites, the Kassites, the same groups that ruled in Babylon are the same groups ruling in that area, making a new Babylon, a mystery Babylon. So you can see right here, the reason why I want to show you this is because these groups were all calling each other brothers. The Hittites, the Mitanni, right? Mitanni going to have connections with the Hurrians, just like the Kassites having connections to the Hurrians. He's going to have connections here. He's going to have a lot of connections to these ones over here, right? These ones are going to have connections to groups like the Gutians. They came down, right, from the Zagros mountain, came down to these, right? They would be of these groups up here coming down. The Mitanni, the Hittites, and Egypt, they was all calling each other brother. The Hittites, Mitanni, Kassites over Babylon, and Egypt were calling each other brother. These were calling each other brother. And Elam. That's important to understand. Elam, we're going to look at Elam and what groups were in Elam. Very important to understand when we're looking at these. So a lot of these are going to be very important to note. They will be calling each other brother because they were giving their wives to each other. Now I'm going to show you this part here. For their wives, their daughters.
To the north, Assyria had grown into an imperial power in her own right, and the two kingdoms clashed over their ill-defined mutual border and over control of the trade routes that crossed northern Mesopotamia between Iran and the Mediterranean. In southwest Iran, a resurgent kingdom of Elam began launching raids into Kassite territory from the 14th century on. People named the Kassites moved into the vacuum left behind by the Hittite sack of Babylon in 1595. To the north, Assyria had grown into an imperial power in her own right, and the two kingdoms clashed over their ill-defined mutual border and over control of the trade routes that crossed northern Mesopotamia between Iran and the Mediterranean. In southwest Iran, a resurgent kingdom of Elam began launching raids into Kassite territory from the 14th century on. The Kassites counterattacked into Elam and briefly conquered the Elamite capital of Susa, but they were unable to hold it. The only enduring result was the emergence of a more powerful and even more hostile Elamite state. To the west, the Aramaean nomads who populated the desert fringe began raiding the rich croplands of the river valleys. Desperate attempts to stave off disaster through diplomacy proved futile. The Kassites concluded an alliance with the Hittites and Egypt against the Aramaeans and Assyrians. The alliance collapsed as all three faced increasing threats that ultimately proved fatal. In the late 13th century, the inevitable happened and Kassite Babylonia was attacked simultaneously on multiple fronts. Around 1230, the Elamites launched a devastating raid into Babylonia. The Assyrians attacked from the north. Tukulti-Ninurta I, king of Assyria, sacked Babylon in 1225, took the Kassite king Kashtilyashu IV back to Ashur in chains, and installed an Assyrian puppet on the Kassite throne. The puppet lasted only 7 years before he was driven out, and another Kassite was installing his own puppet in Ashur. But in the end, Kassite Babylonia succumbed. It was Elam that delivered the coup de grace. In 1155, the Elamite king Shutruk-Nohunte crossed the Tigris and led his army through Lower Babylonia, taking and sacking many cities. He overthrew the last Kassite king, Enlil-nadin-Ahi, and placed Babylonia under an Elamite governor. The Elamites savagely looted the cities of Mesopotamia and then imposed tribute on them. Attempts at rebellion were mercilessly crushed. The Kassites were succeeded briefly by the Isin dynasty, whose most forceful and famous ruler was Nebuchadrezzar I. Around 1110, he avenged the Kassites by conquering Susa.
So remember, the kingdom's coming, Nebuchadnezzar's great father. So obviously that's not talking Nebuchadnezzar, the one who comes in 599 BC, but this is obviously Nebuchadnezzar during the time Israel's coming out of the wilderness and settling in the land of the Levant. So remember, they came out of the wilderness. Israel came out of the wilderness, and they was working on these sides because remember they had to deal with the Edomites, the Moabites, and the Ammonites, and then above them was the Amorites, right? And what did Israel do? They finally, got through and they settled in some of these little areas and whatnot. But over here, you're going to have a whole kingdom over here that's going to be not Israel. That's very important. Not everyone in the Middle East are Israelites. That's very important. So that's why this is important. So you see Elam there,
and destroying Elam. But his success was temporary. Soon afterwards, Babylonia fell into political obscurity, and there it was to languish for 500 years.
All right, so now let's understand something. So let's go back over here. So the reason why I wanted to show you that is because now I'm going to show you a little bit something extra, I had talked about Elam a while back. Let me plug this in because sometimes let me just grab something here. All right. So now a little bonus. Who is Elam? A little interesting information. Now I had showed before. I just want to show a quick summary. I had showed on a little video before on who's Elam, right? I did a little bit on Elam. If you haven't seen yet, there's some real interesting history on this little video that I put on there real fast. I got a timestamp on here, I believe. Let me see. Actually, right here. So I'm just gonna pause this real fast. Just talk about the difference between A and B lineages, because a lot of people don't know that A and B lineages don't create CT. A and B lineages are their own lineage. They have their own branch. This little branch right here is a straight line. As you know, on a table, these corners mean nothing. These little corners right here, unless they are also followed by a haplogroup, they mean nothing. They're just you can also draw it as a straight line. So CT. So they come from their root. These come on their own way. So these shoot out this way, A and B, and then you got your CT lineages. I'm going to let you hear a little bit of that. But before I show you that, let me show you something real fast from a book. It's going to be obviously taking the diversity of people of India. This is going to be from genetics from 2000 to 2018 of the ancient individuals of India. So here's just a little summary of what it is and everything, just talking about some things from different communities and everything. You can see some very interesting stuff. The reason why is because I'm going to show you its connection with Elam, such as this, for example. I'm going to go down a little bit and read you something here. It talks about the YAP. Now, whenever you see in genetics a YAP lineage, it's always your DE lineages. YAP is only in DE lineages. That's how we also know that DE lineages is a family of its own, because no one else has that YAP lineages besides DE lineages. The lap insertion was observed in 73 samples, of which only you can see a small YAP insertion had haplogroup E. Well, most of the samples had D, which I'm going to show you that of the D groups that's over here. Basically, what they were looking at, I just got this here for an example. Got a better read of it a little down here. So here's a little bit from an article right here talking about YAP signatures of an African Middle Eastern migration into northern India. So this is very important because if you noted what I showed on that little history real fast, Elam fell, right? Elam was sacked, and then it was pretty much they pretty much left that area and everything. This is actually a little information of that migration of those things. I'm going to read something down here. This is just a little idea of what it talks about. That apparently, if you know about the thing that happened with the Muslims, the spread of the Muslims and everything, the divide, there's a difference between the Shiite and Sunni. Shiite actually believe in blood descendants should be on the throne, and Sunni believes that the better man should be on the throne, right? It's not based on bloodline. But this is what it says about these groups real fast. I'm just going to read you something here on this thing. In fact, I'll just go up here a little bit and read that. Sometimes I put an underline on the spot, but this one I didn't, but it's not too hard to find. All right, so in the present study, an attempt has been made to investigate the presence of YAP lineages among different North Indian population groups. People of the Indian subcontinent are one of the most heterogeneous populations in the world, having enormous genetics, culture, and linguistic diversity. Present-day Indian populations are, this is actually very important. It just talks about some things. I'm just going to skip a little down right here. I'm going to read this part right here. Tribal groups are outside the castle heritage. Let me see if this is it. Let me see. In fact, I'm going to read. I'll read it off of this thing because it's right on the first part right here. Right here. So watch what it says here. Interestingly, Sunni Muslims who historically have the same origin from the Middle East showed a complete lack. So they have a lack of YAP lineages similar to other castles. Now, what's important is we're going to look at who are the Sinai Muslims versus the Sunni Muslims. It says you say right here, you can see, I'm going to just read right here. Sunni or Sinai Muslims, due to their lesser number and less admixture with other, obviously, groups of India, still carry the ancestral YAP lineages, which in the probabilities is one of the founder haplogroups. So it's very important. It's just talking about how the YAP lineages will be a founder lineage of the certain groups that were there. I'm gonna show you another one with a genetic study to this. Go down a little bit. So here's one. This is gonna be from one of the genetic studies talking on the same topic. We're gonna get on a talk of Elam. So it just talks about the YAP signature in an African Middle Eastern migration into India. That's very important, right? This is one of those studies. I'm gonna read it off of here. This is what it says about this little study, a little information on it. You can see it just talks about who are the ones that went there. So your Shiite Muslims, you can see that they would have your YAP lineages, which is your D and your E lineages. So they have your D, E in there. They have your YAP lineages, as well as I'm going to show you something with this group here. This is going to be a very important group we're going to look at. Very important group that we have there. So we're not just talking, we're talking E1B1B, but I'm going to show you some other lineages. Also J's and D's. D lineage. Notice how high the D lineage is in Japan. So haplogroup D that left the Middle East and the area. So 57 in the Anu, and different Japanese lineages, they have a high level of the DE lineage. They have a high level of it. You can see it in different groups, in different ones in the Middle East and everything, whatnot. Now, just to show a little understanding, very important to note the difference, because the reason why I'm showing you this is because what it's talking about is it's talking about right here. It's talking about how the Shiite Muslims, it says the Shiite Muslims of North India who trace their origin to the Middle East show the presence of YAP elements with haplogroup E lineages at frequencies of 11%. Now that's very important because they actually have mostly D. They talk about here, talk about the classification under haplogroup D, comparing it and everything, and have a little bit of talk about them. You can see some talk about the jar wall. You see this group right here, this group, Adamain, Sin, or how you say that, this group right here, and the jar wall. For to show you something, they also, obviously, if you look at the lineages there, we're going to look at the lineages there, get a little understanding. So remember, there's a difference between the Sunni Muslim and the Shiite Muslim. That's very important. So the Sunni Muslim doesn't trace their lineage to the YAP, but the Shiite Muslim, which, as it had said, as you can go a little more into it, they're going to be a group of individuals that follow bloodline. Let me just show you a little bit on that, on how we know that that's what they do. Right here.
Sunnis and Shia both practice Islam, but what's the difference? A disagreement 1,400 years ago over one simple question: who would lead the Muslim community following the death of the Prophet Muhammad in 632 AD? Some believed that the Prophet Muhammad's cousin Ali was the rightful immediate heir, while others thought Abu Bakr, one of his oldest friends, was the better choice. Today, they share a lot of similar beliefs and practices, but Shia believe religious leadership must come from the Prophet Muhammad's descendants, while Sunnis don't. Of the 1.6 billion Muslims, Sunnis don't. Of the 1. Believe religious leadership must come from practices, but Shia believe religious leadership must come from the Prophet Muhammad's descendants, while Sunnis don't. Of the
All right, so you heard that. That's very important to note that the Shiite Muslims, note the difference. The Shiite which go by bloodline versus the Sunni which don't go by bloodline. So the Shiite goes by bloodline, and they have the YAP insertion in them. Now, I'm going to show you something. We're going to keep going because we're going to get deep, and I'm going to show you what we actually find in some areas there. So just wanted to show you some very interesting things. Remember that group? Remember I pointed out something on this list right here? Let me show you something very interesting that you probably haven't seen talked about a lot. And I didn't. You see this right here? Let me show you something. Let me go down here, and I'm going to show you this group here. I hope I'm saying this right. Siddi, Siddi. Let me show you something really interesting about this group here. So they say, this is what they say. They say they are mostly descendant of Bantu people, right? They say they descend from Bantu people, but they're going to be, a lot of them were Muslim, a lot converted to Muslims, things like that. This is what it's talking about here, right? They're going to be in India and Pakistan. So remember, Pakistan, we're talking about right here, Pakistan and India. So they went from Pakistan to India. We're going to get a little understanding on this group here. Let me show you something first. So obviously looking at some history, here's some people who they are. You can see a little bit of what they look like and everything, get an idea of them. There's going to be that group in Pakistan. You can see they were there for a long time. You can see right here, it even talks about the first Sadis, or Siddis, how you say that, are thought to arrive in India in 628 AD, which you know that was the time of the, the Islamic conquest that was going on there, right? You can see what's going on there. Now, obviously, I'm going to show you that they've been there longer than that. So what you also can see here, this group, I'm going to show you the genetics that's found there. Y chromosome, you know what you see in this area? Remember how they said the Bantu people? What haplogroup is the Bantu people? E1, B1, A, M2. Because in Elam were Shemites. There were Shemites in Elam. There's D descendants there, and there's E1, B1, B descendants there, and there's E1, B1, A descendants there in large portions. And in fact, in about 42 to 37% of these ones in this area and this area. So I'm going to show you this area first. This is where you find E1, B1A, a large portion in this area. I don't know if I got a better map. This one's okay, but not, it's India. It's where India is. So right here. So you're getting a good idea of this group here. Or I could just put the pinpoint of the location on there, which would help. I think to pinpoint the location. I'll just grab just to show you, just for the live sake, let me show you these locations right here. Let me show you this one first. It's right here, E1B1A, large portion in this area. E1B1A, a large portion in this area. Let me show you another spot right here. All right. And understand, I wasn't even trying to find this. I just end up seeing it. So I just want to go and point it out. So right here too. Here's another place where you get a large portion of E1B1A. And what was over here in this little slope right here? This is an area, if you notice, that Elam and everything and all those areas, they was over here, is actually noted that the D group, the D haplogroup, actually had a area here. I had showed that before on this little video, which I'm going to show a little bit of the DE group and how they actually migrated over here. Let me show you something, in fact, now. I'm gonna show you it now on this. CT, right there, the lower part, haplogroup CT, which is not these ones. It's going to be a different lineage. These are different lineages, different family tree. So CT being his own family tree, this is what they say. Haplogroup CT in the lower right hand contains, according to the author of the study, 19 DNA lineages, all non-African. All non-African. So that's important, because if we look at the information, then we start to notice, because D is actually, a lot of them are Japanese. A lot of them are Japanese. And also, just to show you how we know D is also Shemitic, do you know that there were Elamites found that connect to Elam? That's very important. I'm going to show you something that I was expressing the other day. Like, when you connect pieces of information, sometimes it's like crumbs. You know, you get a little bit. So this just talks about Elamites and everything. And you see this name right here. Very, very interesting. Let me just say something. The reason why I'm showing you this too, because on this same study that talks about the D groups and everything, remember how I was pointing out certain individuals that went, like the jar walls and stuff like that. In fact, right up here, a little bit right there. See this group right here is also talking about them too. So this is going to be another piece connecting these ones. So remember, these were, as it says, they were quote unquote African lineages, but they were actually in the Middle East, and they migrated in large portions. The D group and the E group, the YAP group, went all the way to India, Pakistan, even China and Japan, all the way to very far away. But let's hear a little bit more on this thing. Interesting. I'm going to show you what it's talking about here when it talks about these names and stuff. And it talks about these ones. It just talks about the Sumerians and the Elamites and all these different groups and whatnot. I'm going to go back because this one's just a piece. This is a piece of one thing. I'm going to go to the other one right here. All right, so you see this right here, this little group right here, where it says the undersized Negratic population. It just says Negratic population, which is found in right here, Adabane or Adaman, and it says in other islands and things like that. It just basically says right here, watch what it says here, and other islands south of the Asiatic continent has been supported principally on the strength of some discoveries of Negroid heads. And you see what it's talking about by this person had extended into Babylon. So Babylon. Let me make sure I clarify what you're seeing here. So you see how it says they found Negroid heads at Susa. What is Susa? What place is Susa? Let me see if this will actually know what Susa is. Where is Susa? What is Susa? Susa, let's go to Iran. Susa is the place where Elam was. That was a capital at Elam, Susa. In fact, I'll just put it here. But they said they found their head and they found their genetics there. Susa, Elam. So you can see Susa, right? Elam, right there. So I'm reading. What I'm reading to you is what they found genetically in a capital of Elam, and what genetics is connected with, and what they historically documented it as. Babylonian. So it just says that some of the lineages that went all the way, because this area I'm gonna show you where they are. They basically is like the islands next to Australia and all the way over there in like China. And I'm gonna show you what this is real fast. This is actually a quote from this little book. This is what it's called. Just talking about because I'm gonna get one more detailed. Group D. Remember I was talking about those people from Adaman. This is Abanan. I keep saying this word all weird. Ad or Andaman East people. This is actually pretty much their haplogroup is D, right? their genetics. I'm going to show you right here. Right here, it says all sampled males right here and the jar walls and all that stuff is haplogroup D. You can just see right there. In haplogroup D, M55 is found in about 33% of today's Japanese males. So you see what's going on there? It's just talking about how a lot of the D lineages went over here, and a lot of lineages that you see, especially the Anu. The Anu people especially have it. Now, let me read you something here. Let me just read you something. And this is very important. I'm going to show you something. It says, origins of early Chinese civilizations from Babylonia, Elam, and later Western sources. Do you see what's going on there? I'm not the best reader, so I'm just going to, remember we talked about that, Adam Man, right there? It says right here where it's talking about the places in Indonesia and whatnot, and the Philistines and Philippines and stuff like that, the Philippine Islands and stuff, and other races of men. You can see what's going on there. And what it's talking about, it says, nowhere is the contrast more striking than between these type of people, the Negro Berenice or Berries, and remember we just pointed out these people, the Avanese people and all that. What's going on there? It's connecting. What it's doing is connecting them from Babylonia, Elam, and all the sources and the places where they first came. They were first from. That's very important because remember, what did we just confirm? And we can connect the D lineage with their homeland. Right? When Syria, Babylonia was all here, they pushed some groups and whatnot out. They say the Negroid look, but they're in Australia, right? They say Asiatic, very Asiatic look. Some in New Ireland, they say, all in the areas by what's the word I'm looking for? Australia. Watch what they say about the Elamites. The Elamites of Mesopotamia appear to have been a Negroid people with kinky hair and to have transmitted this racial type to the Jews and Syrians. That's important. It says there's a curliness of hair together with a Negroid eye and full lips. It's very important, right? They even, on this same thing, right, talking about the elements of Babylonia. Remember, we looked at that, connecting the Elamites with Babylonia, right, the D group, and the people from Adaman, how you say that, and you can see what's going on there. And then it just says right here, it is possible that in or on the verge of Arabia, the ancient basal stalk of you can see what they're saying, the Negroid part divided into two parts, and just talks about stem into different areas and everything. We talk. Oh, I don't know why this thing always does that. It pops in a different tab. But you see how we're connecting this? You see how much connections the connection is? You see how deep this goes? They found a lineage, the D lineage in Susa. They found it, and they found that it went all the way and left that area when it fell, right? That's why I was showing you the ending of the Kassites when the Elam fell, and then they had spread. They went all the way to Asia. That's very important because the DE lineage, we also know, is a lineage that is going to be separate from others, especially by that YAP insertion. No other lineage has a YAP insertion besides the DE lineage. So that's very important to understand, which comes from CT. So from CT is a DE lineage that, if we look at very carefully, we can find them in different areas where they should be during their migration. Now, just to get a pinpoint more understanding, you're not going to find any ancient sources of this migration. Do you know why? You're not going to find ancient sources of this migration. Here's a little bit of understanding. Because language is a recent development, there is no written record of ancient India history, right? There is no reliable written history of the Indian subcontinent before Alexander. Now, obviously, what I was showing you was actually papers from all the way from China, because we don't got no history in India, but China was recording history. China was recording history, and Japan, China, all these ones were close, and they were recording the migration of peoples coming in those areas. The Negroid peoples having haplogroup D that had settled in those areas. But you can see right here, obviously, before Alexander, before the rise of the Greek Empire, 327 BC, you're not going to get any great resources. That's why we look at genetics, because genetics also tells a story. Genetics tells a story that just came out in the 19th century, gives us a chance to look at things that aren't documented, but things that are very important. So just a little bit there, just a little information, the reason why looking at those things are important. But let me show you something. Let me show you something else. Here's what we are looking at, the E lineage, right? This is actually what I'm showing you here is actually ancient genetics. What this is. Let me actually click this and show you something. So right here, we're looking at now, obviously exploring ancient footprints with Y DNAs from the Indian subcontinent, right? Let me show you what we find in the Indian subcontinent, right? This is a long time ago. And what we find there is, you can see here in the checkpoints, we got some E lineages, India. Some E lineages over here. Some more places in India. You can see right here, this place in India. Also here. You can see some more E lineages in North India. Some more places in India. Pakistan. Some more places in Pakistan, which we had looked at. Remember, we had looked at those, even the MT DNA went over there. There's some more places in Pakistan and some other places in Pakistan. Ancient Pakistan, ancient India, you can find ancient E lineages, ancient E and D lineages over there. That's very important. So that's why I wanted to show you that, because when it comes to the genetics of that area, we can note it by the concentration of papers that put all these things together, that shows us that the D and E lineage was a separate lineage, which we also find in certain native populations of the Middle East. So it's very important to understand. But we do have evidence of the migration of the DE lineage. So very important that the DE lineage is a different lineage than other lineages. So that's just a little information on Elam. I can do a deeper live. I can go a little deeper into it and actually go a little more deeper into it. But today I wanted to just talk about the Kassites. So as always, when we get to the end, I'm going to summarize it. Let me just make sure we don't need none of these for the summary. We don't need these technically. Close this. Remember, I just showed you that. Really interesting. The E1B1A, very large portion up there in India and Pakistan, right? That's why I showed you those ancient ones. Even E was over there in those areas long ago. Very important. YAP insertion, close that. We don't need that. So remember, now let's talk about what we just learned today. Before we look at that, does anyone have any questions before we put a summary? Let me close this. Let me just make sure everyone's good. If you have any questions, beloved family, ask, and we'll go over in more details if something wasn't clear or something like that. Yep. So DE lineages are Shemitic lineages. That's very important. DE lineages come from CT. They're Shemitic lineages. We're proven Shemitic lineages by history, right? It's very important. They're not African lineages. A and B lineages are native African lineages. We can also do a live on that and talk about how they're native and how sometimes when we go back and see why E is large there is because they replaced the original inhabitants. We had talked about that before. They call it the Bantu expansion, which is the evidence of E growing in Africa. Very important. Not that E was major in Africa. And also, just for another piece of evidence, one more piece of evidence just to show that the E1B1A lineage was in the Middle East. There's a video that Beniyah had did. If you didn't see it, you should see it. It's a very important video. in connection to all these things. The reason why is because what he was able to do, which I'm also contacting this family company, this family DNA company, to get some information. I'll do a live on a review on his video. If you haven't seen this, definitely see it. But I want to show you a very important point on this that I put a timestamp on.
Right, they were in a specific place, right? And we're going to take a look at that here in the following slides. But just know that they were there in the area of Senegal and Guinea-Bissau. Initially, those were the places where the Portuguese settled. Let's take a look to see whose DNA was there.
Right here. Let me show you something.
Now, notice very little matches in Africa during the Neolithic age, right? As far as our DNA matching archaeological sites.
So right here, he's actually using a genetic company, and he pulls up his genetics, and you see the E lineages in different areas. Now, that's obviously important because he actually is E1B1A, which I believe to be the Israelites, and many people believe it to be the Israelites. Now, what's important about this finding, obviously, when he's looking at the Neolithic and the connection to them, you got to note where these locations are. I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to do a major live on these things because these are suspected areas.
However, when we advance through time, we start seeing matches in Africa, but they're in East Africa.
So you can see right here, notice this lineage right here. He's E1B1A, and he has this is going to be very early on. And you can see E1B1A in the Levant. So that's very important in these different areas. Not in these areas yet because of the information of the Bantu expansion talks about that they later grew and started to be a larger descent here. But before, A and B lineages were mainly in these areas. I just want to show that real fast on that. I got some other information on those timestamps, but I'll talk about that later on. Let me close this. All right, so any questions before we do a summary? And then we'll start getting to the summary. Are Elamites the same as Assyrians? No. So Elamites would be a group of original Shemites. They did integrate some European descents, but they mostly was Shemites. They would be of the line of Shem. The Assyrians, what's important to note about the Assyrians, the history of Assyria, the Assyrians originally were an Indo-European group. The first Assyrians from Ashur was Shemitic, but what happened was the Arabians came up and conquered a lot of areas of the Assyrian area, and they became Neo-Assyria. Neo meaning new Assyria. And that Assyria was where I'm looking for, as it went through its transition with the Kassites, they later became more Indo-European as more groups came in, like the Mitanni and stuff like that. So Assyria is actually a mingled group, but the Elamites were far from the corner, and they were very strong, and their position was a very strategically powerful position where they couldn't get invaded from all sides, like how some being in the middle of Mesopotamia was. So Elam was more over here. It's hard to see the geography, but it's like a field of walls of mountains that they had mountains blocking them, but there was a way around them, but they had to go through a certain way to get into these areas. But Assyria being over here was mixed with Mitanni and the Hurrians and the Hittites and different groups that were mixing in those areas. They would be a very mixed. They were not Shemites by the end of it, by the end of the Kassite Empire. Just to get a little information on that. That's a good question, though. That's a very good question because they can see example. So M2 75, that would be Shemites. But that lineage would not lead to the E1B1B or E1B1A lineages, but it would be Shemites. So technically, that's one of those lineages that I'm doing a study on. E1A and E2, those are Shemites, but which Shemites, that would be an interesting one to get into. Depends on the percentage. Amen. Just seeing how everyone's doing. Amen. All right, so graph and enlarge it where the lineage graph is. Talks about Which one was this one talking about? Yep, still waiting on that E1. That's what I'm getting to. Yep, I'm doing that one. That one's it's really deep. E2 and E1A, very deep on those ones. Very, very deep. But here, maybe the summary will help with that question. So let's do a quick summary. What did we just learn today? Oh, I didn't show this either. You know, the word cash comes from the word Kassites. The cash, that name also comes from that. Let me actually go to that in the linguistics. Let me go to that real fast on here. In fact, I probably could find it just by, I know I typed it down, at least I believe. Let's see. At least I think I typed it down. Cash. Let me try to find it. So I'm gonna show you something real fast because I didn't show this. But when you think of like cash, like the currency of cash, it comes also from this name, connections with linguistics. Let me see, actually a little up here, right here. Maybe it's this. Let me just double check. Let me just see if it's on this one. Yes. Let me just see if it's here. If it's not, I'll just throw it on this note. Because I had this little linguistic connection that was fairly interesting. Let's see if I put it on here. Let's see. No, it's not on this one. I'll find it later. It's an interesting connection. Maybe I can find it real fast. Let me see if I can find it. Let's see. Nah, I had to look on it and grab it from the linguistics. But it's an interesting connection when connecting them. That the word cash is connected with the word Kass. So I'm gonna put that on here. Maybe I'll put it right here. Maybe I'll put it on the bottom right here. I'll put it somewhere right there when I come back to it. All right, so let's quickly do a summary. Is it two? It's not. You want to be on A? Oh yes. So just for clarity, yes, E2 75. Just to show that real fast before I do a summary. Let me just show you something on why E2 is not E1B1A. Because technically, in fact, I'll just type it down. I'll just show you. Right. Down to wiki. Let's go to the wiki. Just to show that. Love, brother. E75. So technically, going down here, let me just put it in right here. Now it is a Shemite. But technically, right here, you see right here, E-M75, that's actually E2. Now, I want to show you on a branch, on a tree, which this thing doesn't really have a good branch or a tree here. So let me open up something here and just show that for the sake of information. But always remember, you're saved. The way that we're saved versus what we're doing here, this is more history, understanding ancient peoples, the Middle East, getting an understanding on the Middle East. But just to show the difference there, and obviously, at least you're a Shemite. I'm R1B. I'm Japheth. But I'm not ashamed of the fact of how salvation is given. Salvation is given by faith, not by blood. In fact, our blood is changed by Christ. That's very important at the end of it all. Obviously, those who are of Israel is extremely blessed, obviously, because they're, as it says, grafted in again. How much more those who have. But let us also know that how we're saved. You think the touch? So y'all willing, because all 2022, I want to do a lot of prophecy, but I'm going to try to touch on these E lineages that I didn't get a chance to touch on, which is E1A and your E2, which, remember, E1 is different than your E2 lineages, which, let me just scroll this down. I'm just going to click this so I can go right to one of those little images. You just go over right here. Just going to go to a tree. This one. All right, so this one don't have it. Let me just see if I got one with E2 on it, which I do, I believe. I just don't think. In fact, it might be over something. Let me see. Where is that? I have one of them have E2 on it. And the reason I want to show it because the break of it is fairly interesting. Let me go, okay, right here. Right down here. I'm going to just click this just to go over to it. And then we'll touch on some of the lineages that are Shemitic, but what's the word I'm looking for? Because while doing random studies, I also randomly bump into E1s and E2s. I found some E1s and E2s in different areas in ancient times. We'll talk about that too. So E1 leads to E1b, but there's a split, and there's E1a, which is a little different. It's going to lead to different genetics. And then there's your early split. E2 is an earlier split that leads to E2. That's going to be your M75. But what leads to the Abraham lineages is E1b1. E1b1 is going to be what's noted as Abrahamic lineages, like E1b1b and E1b1a. But that's how pinpoint it is. But yet, these are still Shemitic lines, right? If they're all under the same tree, that's what makes them Shemitic. That's very important. I'm going to close this. So I just want to show that for example. But if you have any other questions, I'm looking, I'm watching. We'll touch on those. I would also like to hear. Oh, yes. If you want to get a good live, brother, on L2, go to Synthetic Sunday. There was a brother by the name of New Exodus, and he did a very great live, very deep. I had to add it to the Synthetic Sunday playlist, but he did a very deep live on L2 and how L2
known trader.
L2 was found in ancient Syria. Tel Halula, in fact, the same place where L3 was found. Right here, watch this video that he did. This brother, he did a very great video. At least I think that's New Exodus. But he did a great video. Watch that video, and you'll see a lot about L2. That's a very deep video. And if you haven't seen the verification for the E1B1A, obviously, Beniyah, I say that to the playlist. That's very deep, very, very deep. And if you want to know about family trees, I added this one we did on family tree. Not family tree. On Flawless Breeds, we did a whole long list on not genetics, but just the family lines of the biblical narrative with the historical facts. It was like a review video. Very deep, very deep. And then this just talks about the split of Ham, Shem, and Japheth and everything. I just want to show that. The reason why is because information. So you can see I put this Kass Cash here because I was going to go over that too, how cash, the word cash is connected with Kass and everything. But now let's talk about a summary. Summary. So this is going to be our summary. What did we just learn today? We just learned that the Kassites, they were a people that took over Babylonia, right? They would actually be a people that will be identified as coming from the Zagros Mountains. That's north, right? Zagros Mountains would be north. So this Iraq, everything underneath the Zagros Mountains, you see this little dark line here? That's the Zagros Mountains. Everything underneath Zagros Mountains would be met in the the Fertile Crescent, or like places where Abraham was. But the group of the Kassites were in Iran or from Georgia, from the Caucasus Mountains. Go over here. So you can see the Kassites had settled in Babylonia. They were called the Kassites. In Akkadian, they call themselves a different language, but they're known as the Kassites. And the Kassites, obviously, they renamed the land of Babylonia, give it the name, and it sounds like Kurd, right? Kurd, very, very highly related with that. That's something else I didn't go into. Assyria was his own. The Kassites were their own. The Assyrians and the Kassites started to mix, though. They started to become kind of fairly related. That was something that happened over time. The Kassites ruled from 1595 BC to 1155 BC. It is thought that the Kassites came from the Zagros Mountains, which we talked about before, north of Babylonia. Like we have said in other places, came from the Zagros Mountains and everything. We found out that the people who they might be related to, most likely, as there's a lot of information that verifies who they're related to, that their genetics actually show that they're a mix of Indo-Europeans, as the Kassites and the Gutens are known to be Indo-European. They had came into the Levant and settled. They had mixed in with the Medes, which were also Indo-European. They would be known for their horses. In fact, they worship horses. That's very important. The Kassites were known to have your classic European lineages, which you can see right here, except for your E lineage, which is that YAP lineage, which is one of the lineages of the Middle East. But these will be your classic European lineages. All of these come from F. All these haplogroups come from F. Your J, R, I, G, N, all of them stem from F. T, all of them stem from F. F will be the grandfather of those lineages. That's very important. As we had talked about before, and with the verification with family tree DNA, we know that F is a father of all the lineages under CF, but not D, E, and A lineages. We also had confirmed that all those lineages were seen in the Ashkenaz, the Armenians, the Assyrians, the Amorites, right? The Canaanites, matching with the female lineages. All the female lineages match. All the European lineages match. In fact, we found out that every Y chromosome amongst the Armenians and the Ashkenaz are the same. You know who else match? I had talked about this before, that the Armenians and Ashkenaz are the same. And do you know what they say about the Armenians? We had talked about that. Armenia has been connected with biblical Ashkenaz, and the Armenians are termed the Ashkenazi nation in their literature. And we also connected the fact that the Armenians is actually the Byzantine word for Elam, or not Elam, my bad. For the Amaleks. Got the Elam stuck in my head because we finna talk about that. But the Byzantine word for Amaleks was actually what's the word I'm looking for? The word for Amalek was actually Armenian. Long story short, you can see that just by going to the Jewish library and looking up the word Armenia, and you'll see all that there. What I'm saying there. The Amaleks. I'm gonna scroll down just to show you a little bit. Let me see if I got one more piece on this thing. Okay, so the Amaleks, the Amorites, the Kassites, the Hittites, the Mitanni, the Armenians are all related, also with the Turkish, also with Turkestan, also with groups in ancient Turkestan. Ancient groups in ancient Turkestan are related. And we know that by their lineages. Go over here. So that's why we can see that a lot of the Oghuz Turks, or how you say Og Turks, or the Turks, the actual genetic Turks, have the same mixing of the male lines with different female lineages. So their female lineages will be what brought the males together. That's very important. So it shows that they were part of that same confederation of brotherhood that was going on there. Also the Ashkenazi, same. All of it's the same. All of them had the same exactly the same. That's very important. So it's like the world. The world's Babylon. It's just that simple. The world's Babylon. It's nothing new under the sun. There's no surprising mixes, no extra lineages, just nothing new under the sun. So that's what we found out about the Kassites. And we found out that the same groups of the Kassites, the same groups of them, are today working on building almost like a Babylon in the lands. If you haven't seen it, Designer City, the city, very important to know a little bit about that and what's going on in those lands and everything. And then obviously the Kass group. I talked about it before. We had looked at the Kass group. The Kass group is a group, one of the largest investment groups in Georgia, right? In Georgia. And where else? Israel. The company was founded by the Jewish inventor, Mr. Hanok Kass. See what's going on there? And remember, we looked at the linguistics, connecting the linguistics. And remember how I showed you that word also comes from the German, the German Kass. Remember we had looked at that in the right here when we had connected, and then we connected the genetics and everything. When we was looking at this and putting those together and putting these things together with what it's connected with, just to show a little bit of that linguistics. The reason why is because I'm going to show something real fast down here. So this is going to be in the description, but here it is. When we talked about Kass, the reason why is because it's connected with the Germans. And remember how I showed you that the Ashkenaz and the Armenians were vice versa? The names were vice versa. You can see here, Kass, with that same word. It was the Jewish Ashkenazic. You see that word Ashkenazic? Let me show you something real fast on this. Let me show you something real fast going up here. Let me read something real fast to you. You see how it says connected with the German and Ashkenazic? Well, it just so happens we got a 1700 quote, right? This is from the early 1700s. It's going to be from the 1706. Antiquities of the Nations, on the more particular, the Celts and the Gauls, is what it says here. It says this. It says, so that it may be said that Asia was the cradle of the human race and their original country, it was from thence those swarms came. When it's talk about the swarms, talk about the barbarians, which filled Germany. So remember how we've seen the connection with this word, right? In connection with the East German and Ashkenazic. Watch what it says here. I'm going to read you something right here. Okay, so they filled East Germany. I might click this so I can get a better spot. Okay, right here. It was from thence those swarms came that filled Germany and other Western and Northern countries. And here you must know that the Hebrews, at least the modern Jews, believe that the Germans owe their origin to him who in scripture is called Ashkenaz, who was the son of Gomer and coincidentally the grandson of Japheth. And hence it is that when they speak of the Teutons or Germans, they call them Alkanazim in their language, or Ashkenazim, Ashkenazi. You see what's going on there? As supposing, or some of these words, supposing them to be, I can't remember, possibly of Ashkenaz. You see what's going on there? So that's very important. You see the connections there? Very important, connecting the linguistics with the genetics. When we look at the genetics, we get the same results. Remember, we had looked at genetics as well of these people with the same name groups, which, let me see where that is on here. I'm just close this as I have it already screenshotted on this thing. Right here, I always screenshot just in case people try to change stuff. So R1B, R1A, I, E, J, G, N, T. Same groups, same exact groups that we see in the Ashkenaz. In fact, I'll put it right here. Shrink it down just so you can see it. I had got this picture because I think this picture is controversial, and I think it's very important to see. I think this picture is very important to see. So you can see, let me close these. We don't need these, need this. You see right there? Let me make sure I put this with it so we can look at this at the same time. So you see what groups there? R1b, R1b, R1a, R1a, I, E, E, J, J, G, G, N. This one don't have an N, but some of them have an N because this is just a summary. The N is smaller on a lot of these, but let me scroll it up on this. Some of them have an N, some of them don't. So N is like a smaller group and everything. So you can see some of these would on one of them. Let me see. Shoot, maybe they don't have N. No N, but they do have all the other groups, which N, remember, like I'm showing you, make sure you understand this. All of them come from F, right? Here's F right here. It's going to make all these lineages. Where does N come from? You can see going up here. In fact, go down real fast. I think I just scrolled by it. Oh, right there. There it is. So you can see N coming from K. So coming from these groups, but they are all, these are, in fact, you know your L and T, do you know that these are actually K groups? L and T actually were nicknamed because they actually come from K. They're actually K groups. So a lot of these are actually just K, just given subnames of K. That's just important to understand. That K is actually what makes your R's, your N's, your L's and T's and stuff like that. But they're all related. They're all brothers. They're all related. They're all from the same groups, all from FM89. And remember, I already showed that FM89 is a person. FM89 is a person. That's very important. Just to show that, just for the live sake, just to show, because remember, let me just look at it. Amen. It is small. Yeah, I'm gonna look at that again, a little more detailed. It is small. You're right. I'm gonna look at that a little more detailed, see if there's N on there, because I'm believing that N is definitely on that list. But let me read you something real fast, just to show you that F is a parent lineage of all the lineages under it, but not D, E, and not A and B lineages. I'm gonna just show a new quote that I had got from Family Tree DNA that I put on the, I didn't talk about this yet, the F haplogroup, but I'm gonna read from here as is fairly important. And thank you, Marvelous 7, for looking at that detailedly. That's good. So F, remember I talked about it, FM89 is the parent group of all the groups under it, like N, K, G, I, J, K. All those come from F. F makes all these lineages. Not E, not D, and not A and B lineages. So F is not Noah, but F does make all the lines under it. Let me just go down real fast and read something here. All right, so this is going to be something from Family Tree DNA. I just always like to get extra confirmations for stuff. Even if I'm talking to a geneticist, just get another confirmation from another geneticist. I must again ask, as I seen the tree on the site, I need a second professional confirmation. J1 and T haplogroups are from IJK. Is all haplogroups like GHIJK related to FM89? FM89 was the living grandfather of all lines under it. I'm asking, is haplogroup F the grandfather of groups like J and K groups? The reason why I got to get detailed, because you got to get detailed with them, or they're not going to answer it the way that you want them to. So watch what he says. Thank you for contacting Family Tree DNA. Haplogroup, and remember, I'm talking to a big Y specialist, right? Not just someone who's just in the office or nothing. Big Y specialist. He's going to be saying what's going on there, knowing about the SNPs and everything. So you can see right here, Haplogroup J1 and T are downstream of haplogroup IJK. That means they're related to IJK. You are also correct that F-M89 was the ancestor of GHIJ and K and all other branches downstream of that SNP and haplogroup. That means they're all related to FM89 is the father of the Japhetic lines. So you could say the original progenitor of haplogroup F is, however, many great grandfather, right? Many great grandfather of haplogroup J and K. And J and K are downstream of F. Downstream means that they directly descend from them. That's very important. So remember, FM89 makes all these groups, but CF, everything under CF is one. Everything under DE, which is the YAP lineage, these are one. This is one family and this is one family. These don't, CF doesn't make DE and DE doesn't make CF. A Hamite or Hamites are A and B up here, and the way that that's broken, gotta see that one video on how that's broken. You gotta be careful when looking at those. These don't make these. That's important. But CF being Japheth and DE being Shem, Shem doesn't make CF. I mean, Shem doesn't make Japheth, and Japheth doesn't make Shem. Ask yourself this in a biblical narrative: does a Shemite ever make a Japhethite, and does a Japhethite ever make a Shemite? That's what you're seeing genetically. CF doesn't make DE and DE doesn't make CF. That's what you're seeing. DE is Shemites, CF is Japhethite. That's very important. Otherwise, let's say someone tried to run and try to say F is Shemites. I'm just going to use this for example. What if someone said, no, F is Shemites? Where's Japheth? Where's the line of Japheth? Because every single line underneath F is one family. Therefore, this line is Japheth. This line is actually going to be Shem, and this is going to be Hem. That's very important because A and B lineages don't make CF or DE lineages. Make sure you look at an unrooted chart so you can see how that actually is designed. Unrooted chart, which I talk about many times because many people, you got to be careful what charts you use. You want to see a real genetics chart, look at a unrooted chart, which has a different design, which we can talk about that another time. But CF is Japheth, DE is Shem. So every line under CF is one family. Every line under DE is one family. Every line under A and B, those are one family. That's very important. So those are the three lines of Ham, Shem, and Japheth, which we note throughout history. We note those things throughout history. It's very important. But a lot of times people want to do stuff like this. They want to do something that's totally against the tree and say that supposedly you can take it like this and say, you know what, I'm just going to take a few of these, even though they all descend from F, and say J is Jews, T is Jews, and everything else is not Jews. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous because we know that if this was one line, it would be Shemites, but they're not Shemites. That's very important. Otherwise, you're saying every line under here is Shem. That's not true because they all come from one grandfather, which is F. If you understand the biblical narrative, amen. If you don't, then you're going to trip on that. But if you do, you know that anyone who's Shem can't make a Japhethite, and anyone who's Japheth can't make a Shemite. So therefore, this is Shem, and this is Japheth. That's very important under CF. Now, going back over here, and that's why I want to read this thing to you real fast, because from a geneticist, they'll tell you themselves. They'll tell you that one lineage can make another lineage. Well, over here, one lineage can make another lineage, but let's finish reading. So F is the, however, many great grandfather of haplogroups J and K, because we found out F is a living person. J and K are downstream of F and descended from the man, right? This isn't Noah, because Noah, if this was Noah, wouldn't Noah make D, E, and A and B lineages? This is in Noah. This is under Noah. That's very important. So descendant from the man who first had FM89 mutations, which F-15527 being another branch of his descendants. So it's very important, very, very important. So that's very, 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 very important, because they're not going to tell you, academia is not going to tell you, oh, that's Japheth or that's Shem. Of course, they're not going to tell you that. You got to note the split. That's all you got to do, is note the actual genetic confirmed split. And that's the split. D, E, C, F, and A and B lineages are all different. Those three lineages are different lineages. That's very important. The biblical narrative is truth. It's a truth factor. And reality is showing us those things. Let's continue with the summary. So obviously, seeing those lineages, that's very important. In fact, I think the brother said that he's seen N on here. Let me look a little more close on these, because I'm sure that there's an N right there, right there. There's an N here. This one might have one somewhere. I don't know why I have this in reverse like that. But you'll see N, and obviously remember, these are just summaries of all the groups, of the major groups. So most likely they have N, but probably a small portion. Just looking at some other ones just to see. This one has N. This is Iran Turks. This one has 1% N, so little percent right there. And you can see N, little percentage. You can see that's very important. Go back over here. So let's compare it again, so you can see what we're looking at here. When we're looking at this, let me just grab it right there. Going down. And as always, all love. We're not doing this to bash no one. We're just doing this for truth, because truth is good, because truth is always good. So back over here. Grab the wrong one right here. So you can see R1B, R1A. So R1B, R1A. And I'm on bias. There's mine right there. R1B, R1A, I. Your E1B1B right there. Your J right there. Your G. You got your G right there. We already seen the N, right? We looked at the N on there. We seen the N. And then your T group. Notice these mixes, right? Why is there not no like large group of M, like haplogroup M, or a large group of haplogroup C or something like that? Why is no like offshore haplogroup, like, some different group? But these common ones, your R's, your I's, your E's, your J's, your G's, your T's, Q's and N's and stuff like that. That's very important. That's very important that we're seeing these common mixes in these groups. So the reason why I'm showing you that, because the Kassites, they're the same. They're the same. All these are the same. The Amorites, the Kassites, the Canaanites. I'm talking the actual Canaanites, the real Canaanites, like the ones in. Be careful when you look at like places like Megiddo. Remember, it's written in Judges 1-3. Where were the Canaanites? In Megiddo, the Canaanites were in Megiddo. Israelites didn't take Megiddo. They didn't take Seir. They didn't take not Seir. Sidon. They didn't take Sidon. Yet you find a lot of Canaanites in those areas. And then you get people celebrate and say, "Oh, see, that lineage is found in Israel." But then when you look at the exact lineages with the female lineages, it's very controversial. It opens up the doors for knowledge. See, Q right there. Told you it's got a Q. These groups right here, very, very highly related. And remember, we confirmed that this wasn't a Shemitic group. This was an Indo-European group that came downwards and had, what's the word I'm looking for? Conquered Babylonia. So as we see, however, the arrival of the Kassites has been connected to contemporary migrations of Indo-European peoples, right? Several Kassite leaders and deities were born Indo-European names and everything. You see, obviously having Indo-European ruling areas, like the Hittites had Indo-European ruling, the Mitanni had Indo-European ruling. Obviously the Hurrians, Hurriel, the also the different groups. Maybe we'll do a live on the Hurrians and Mitanni and stuff like that. Ancient peoples of the Levant, very, very fun, very interesting. Guttans, I wonder am I saying that right? But this group also had an Indo-European, so this was Indo-European. The Assyrians became Indo-European. Very important. Even the mixes, that's why they were calling each other brothers, because they were mixing. The groups were mixing, and they had a common haplogroup. They had the common haplogroups. So R, I's, T's, J's, some E's a little bit. And then obviously noting that this city, this place that they call D City, the city, D City, designer city, but they shortened to D City. This is D City. Looks just like Babylon. This city looks just like this city. This city looks like a modern form with these little points on these things that's supposed to be where the archers shoot out at, but yet they keep that design and then have the walls on one side like this and then have your entrance right there. This city looks just like this city with your little archer areas with the archers and everything, and then your walls on these sides. You see what's going on there? So this city right here, D City, looks like the Babylon. Looks like Mystery Babylon. It's a place where they say that they're uniting Arabs and Muslims together. So it looks just like Babylon. Looks just like Babylon, ancient Babylon. That design doesn't seem like an accident. That design seems on purpose. That design seems like a purpose design. So think about that in the world that we live in, that right now today, we got the same peoples and almost the same building right now today in this world that we live in. So I just want to show you that. And then we had talked about the Elamites having haplogroup D. We had talked about that and the YAP insertion of haplogroup D and the Elamites having that. So with that, family, that's a summary of everything that we have today. This will be in the description. With that, always stay observing the world that we live in, because not everything is black and white. So with that, family, be blessed, be beloved, and as always, family, as always, amen. Amen.